with all of the negative news that's coming out about corruption and doing the wrong things, and chief financial officers and financial directors being mentioned, what is SAICA's position or plans about sending a message publicly that SAICA takes action in disciplining and perhaps suspending members that are found guilty of breaching the code of conduct? I'd like to hear what the plans are, because my view is that SAICA needs to send a very strong message to the public, reassuring the public that SAICA is maintaining standards of the highest order and is doing the right thing. I think that will help SAICA's brand tremendously.
Thank you so much. Some of the questions I'm not going to defer to the panel. I'm going to respond to them directly, like that one. Because it just reminded me one of the things that was part of the plan. Tomorrow we're supposed to have a press conference to share with the public through the media, because the media has been also asking lots of questions to us around these issues. But because of the vote in Parliament tomorrow, we decided that this may not be receiving a priority attention from the media. So we're going to defer that press conference to Tuesday next week, the 15th of August. And I think that's a blessing in disguise, in the sense that the deliberations out of this session are going to help us a great deal to digest these issues and package them adequately in the manner that will be pleasing to yourselves as well. I must say, though, also that many of the people that called me are not SAICA members, but they're concerned leaders in society and in the economy that have been asking what is it that SAICA is doing about these issues. And I've spoken to them directly. They were happy with the response, but that was a telephone conversation bilaterally, and it's not a publicly known position. But I must say that those that we reach out to have been satisfied, and we hope, we're aiming now to make that kind of bilateral discussion a public kind of message as well on Tuesday next week. But I think your input in terms of what will come out of the panel is going to enrich some of the packaging of that message as well. But thanks for noting that point. Yeah. Yes, hi, ma'am. Yes.
I guess as a member, I'm saying, why is there a press conference that's been arranged? Why aren't we being told? We're the members. We're the people who, to some extent, fund your, well, we do fund your salary. There are people who are concerned. You've had conversations with leaders, but you haven't had conversations with your base. And my understanding was that this was what this forum was going to address. Explain what the executive is saying or thinking, and where we should, and give the members a chance to comment on that, rather than we will find out at the press conference.
Yeah. Members are going to find out about that today. That's why we've organized this session specifically for the members. We have been responding to the members, sadly, through some of the comments that the members have been sending through social media and other means, some bilaterally. And I think it's important to say that, as I've admitted, that has not been sufficient. That's why, for the first time, we thought of calling this. Remember, that message went to all 42,000 members that we have. I think they're now 44,000. And only 180, if that number has not grown, on the webcast, and less than 50 in this room. Now, what we're going to do after this, we're going to continue with the communication to the members after this, to make sure that the point that you're making gets given a lot more of elevation. So that's what we're planning as part of ongoing communication to the members.
I would beg to differ. We weren't given a whole bunch of notice. I've actually had to reschedule appointments to come here. I don't know what other people have done. These are the members who've made an effort to and are interested, and I know that there are others. I've spoken to someone else in the room who found out about this, just he didn't read an email because he gets spammed by SAICA. I think that the members who are here are actually entitled to hearing from the executive what steps they're taking.
It's not all lost, ma'am. I mean, whoever is not here will hear about these issues going forward. As I say, this session is being recorded. It's going to be packaged in a manner that every member will have the opportunity, particularly from the panel discussion, which is going to provide most of the meeting information about what you want to hear about. So this will be communicated continuously. This will be communicated quite actively.
When I did articles and did auditing one back in 1971, we were always quoting a case in which the judge held that the auditing profession is not the watchdog of society. So in a period of some 40 years, that concept has been turned on its head. And here we sit, having become, in my opinion, the whipping boys of the investing public, who, rather than blame the executive management or even the non-executive management in companies, seek immediately to blame auditors for any company failures. And I believe that we are somewhat supporting this trend by admitting that we are somehow responsible for what appears in financial statements generally, whereas we all know that those financial statements are a product of the systems that are run by executive management. And to the extent that there is an absence of ethics amongst that class of people, because they're entrepreneurs, they believe they're obliged to take unethical decisions at times in order to make profits, because that's what their investors are actually interested in. So, you know, when it fails, instead of that person taking the blame gets shifted onto us as a profession as a whole, as my colleague is pointing out here. It's not that one individual member of that profession, but the entire profession that gets tarnished. And I'd just like to mention that I was articled at Arthur Andersen and Company. One of the largest firms, of course, at the time. We were, I think, the second largest or third largest international firm. I was auditor of the pension fund, and woke up to find out that the company was now, the auditing firm was now besmirched beyond repair as a result of the actions of a few. And I think that we need to have some safeguard built in, where we say that although the conduct of certain individuals may lead to the impression that the profession as a whole has failed the investing public as a whole, is not true. It's simply certain individuals have made the wrong decision at the wrong time.
The comment reads as follows. I agree with the last two gentlemen. Brand ambassadors should be made an example of by SAICA, and SAICA should distance themselves from short and sweet and focus on positive branding as to remind the public of who SAICA is and what we stand for.
Hi. So just to speak to the previous two comments, the issue is if I remember correctly, there are about 8,000 registered auditors. There are 44,000 CAs. So we need to remember that this is not just auditors that are involved, and actually, as far as I've seen, it's not, you know, it's been the business people. So the question is what is SAICA doing? Not necessarily about those people in business, not registered auditors, which means it's not, they don't fall under URBA. I don't know, and I will not comment on URBA's investigations, because I don't know that we're dealing with that here. We're dealing with CAs. And especially those people who are actually in business and not necessarily acting as auditors. Also, I guess the question is, and my understanding is today is not about getting new rules, and the question that I've had from other members has been, what are we doing in terms of enforcing the existing rules?
If you look at the manner in which we've prosecuted accused persons, it doesn't matter whether you are a board member, you are a trainee, the same standard applies. And if you complain about someone who should have complained, we'll look to our code, obviously, and ensure that that complaint is in line with transgression, which is highlighted in the code, and it will get through to the PCC. Remember, as Alicia alluded to earlier on, the decision whether or not to prosecute does not rest with the lawyers in the house, the legal department. We are entirely sterilized from that process. The decision whether a matter goes ahead is placed before the Professional Conduct Committee, which will then decide whether there is merit or no merit in the complaint. And just to ensure that the decision is made by an independent body which has nothing to do with SAICA, or as some members would like to say, is not reliant on member input on most of the processes which carry on.
Because we, obviously, I'm an auditor in public practice, and we come across a lot of things every day about someone should have, you know, in the context of our audit, for example, that there's a thing that might not be a reportable irregularity, for example, but someone should have at least complained to SAICA.
Yes.
Are the auditors, must we complain about that person somehow?
Well, not to give you too much legal advice, but literally there is a duty to report to those charged with governance. So that would be your first port of call, and obviously to inform the organization. I think what probably one piece which we have not experienced that much in the disciplinary function is the activist member. That much we have not experienced. That person who says this is wrong, like you are saying, you should have complained, you were in the line of this issue, and you did not, therefore I'm going to report you. And that activist member comes in where members cease to be passive spectators of what SAICA does, to become more active in not only informing SAICA of what is happening in their space, but also in protecting what the so-called brand. That is not just about you paying your subscriptions and going that way. It's also about you taking an active role in ensuring that you protect that which you hold dear. So we look at everything. Like I said, we receive all manner and form of complaints. Everything is looked at, everything is placed before the PCC, which makes the final decision.
I didn't know tonight was about, and I might be mistaken, as to the issue of whether SAICA are enforcing their rules. I'm under the impression, and I've spoken to a lot of people, I think they are enforcing the rules. There's no impression, there's nothing in the, I don't know, in the world that says that SAICA are not enforcing. Is this about, are you going to enforce the rules? I sincerely hope you're going to enforce the rules, and I sincerely believe that you are enforcing the rules. Are we talking about, so what are we talking about with regard to the enforcement of the rules? So this is what I'm trying to understand is it a question that SAICA are not enforcing the rules? As someone mentioned that SAICA are not enforcing the rules, because as I understand it, they are. So just a little clarity. I'm under the serious impression that they are, and I in fact know they are. So who's questioning outside in the public somewhere that SAICA are not enforcing the rules?
Yeah. No, thanks for ventilating that one. I think it's a question of awareness. And today is about making that awareness a lot more broader than what SAICA is doing internally. And that's why our communication about what SAICA does to enforce some of these rules and principles and professional conducts and disciplinary action, how is that done, what is the sequence, and our head of legal will be taking us through that, because it's not publicly known by many of our members. And we've realized that most of the comments that have been coming through have been driven by that lack of awareness. And I think it's important that we make that publicly known to all the members. Yeah, so that I think that's the context, yeah. All right, looks like we're running, yeah, there's another comment over there. Maybe let's start this side, and then we'll come to the right. It is working, yes, sir.
Is working.
Yes, sir.
One of the things I think the public see is that SAICA is not working in concert with URBA. They hear two different opinions from the heads of our organization. I think that would be one area that we could pay some attention to. And then also, I don't know if the government auditors are members of SAICA, but their reports appear to get ignored, and there's no comment from SAICA. I think we should, with the corruption and the things that they get reported on, and the few numbers of councils that pass successfully a government audit, that shouldn't just be left. SAICA should be having something to say about those qualified audits.
In terms of the members who find themselves in potentially compromising situations, SAICA used to have an ethics hotline. Is that still working? And the other question I have is in terms of the reporting inconsistency process, reporting members process. Currently, how are these members going to do they have to, does a third party have to nominate, tell SAICA? Currently, SAICA's processes require a higher burden of proof than the public protector in terms of reporting ethical issues, and I don't think that is, I think that will stop people, bar people from reporting ethical breaches rather than encourage them to do it.
Willie?
Terence, there's a comment from a member on the webinar, and it relates to the topic we're just about to cover, and it reads as follows. We need to ensure that there are systems and procedures in place in order that anyone who brings the CA profession into disrepute is disciplined and dealt with in accordance with the SAICA Code of Conduct. Is there currently a SAICA committee that investigates and prosecutes such offences?
When the complaint is submitted in the form of an affidavit, we go through the investigatory phase. We gather evidence. We ask the accused to inform us or respond to the accusations. So we always ask the complainant, do you want us? You must give us the consent to hand your affidavit to the accused. If you're not comfortable with that, we can then redact all information related to your identity, literally give a pro forma complainant to the accused, for which the accused will not know your identity, and they'll respond to us. And obviously we have several meetings over a span of time in which we have meetings with the complainant to clarify the complaint against the accused, at which point the matter is taken to PCC. The additional issue is that when decisions are made in SAICA, what we've done is we've maintained a high level of independence of the disciplinary panel, to the extent that most of SAICA does not know who these people are. They don't have their contact details. It's at arm's length. So we operate quite independently from the rest of SAICA in that regard, just to ensure that the process is not tainted. I think the question was asked why SAICA is not saying anything in the media. It's for good reason. The SAICA executive or the secretariat is regarded as the prosecutorial authority in terms of the bylaws. So if you look at the American system of working, you find that the prosecution or the AG will go out and announce, we've found this guy, he murdered his wife, blah, blah, blah. We don't do that because in our realm, that's regarded as prosecutorial misconduct. It literally gives the accused a way of getting out of being sanctioned by SAICA, because we have taken a view on a matter, and the manner in which we then position that matter before our disciplinary panel can be regarded as biased. We don't have bias in the department. Our effort is to ensure that there is just administrative action, there is a fair trial, and the rights of the accused are maintained or upheld at all times. So we're closely linked to the manner in which the South African Constitution governs the entire Bill of Rights, so to speak.
We have a disciplinary mailbox and all the actual complaints come through. We are also monitoring what's happening in the media and following it closely. You can be assured that every complaint that comes through to us actually goes through to the PCC. We as a secretariat don't make that decision as to whether or not there is improper conduct. We gather the information, we present the case to the PCC, if need be to the DC as well, and those disciplinary committees are the ones tasked with making the decision as to whether or not to proceed or whether or not there is a case of misconduct.
Sorry, you mentioned about that affidavit. On numerous occasions, I've had debates with colleagues where that process has actually, I would say, stopped people from coming forward. I understand why you need it, but there has been occasions in the past where you come up across a colleague that hasn't been doing things properly, and then I've specifically been in a situation where I've been asked to give an affidavit, and I thought, you know what, the world will sort him out one day. Because for me to go through that process, and it's not for me to look into his situation, it's for you guys. And obviously you have to take into account where it comes from. If everybody's bringing nonsense complaints, sure, but I think the affidavit process definitely stops a lot of complaints coming through.
I agree that the affidavit process stops complaints coming through, and as I said, we have a higher level of a burden on our complainants than does the public protector. What the public protector does, and you can see in the press what they've come up with, is that people can make complaints, and then the staff go back to that person, and if necessary, will write up an affidavit after having gone through that process, which seems a little bit, putting the affidavit as the absolute first step seems like, and I agree, I've also said, well, can't be bothered, not going to.
Okay. Well,
The affidavit serves a number of purposes. I think in the recent past, from 2014 up to now, we've experienced a number of complaints in the departments which did not really have that much, I tend to say, substance. So you find people complaining about people's sexuality to SAICA, and that's just one of the weirdest complaints that we get. And those are some of the matters we tend not to put into the PCC, for example. The reason why you want an affidavit is that it shows the seriousness of the concern, but I think there is probably a misinterpretation of the requirement for the affidavit. You're taking that issue under oath. It's going to affect someone's life. There must be a certain seriousness to it. We've received a number of complaints where someone just jots a little line in an email, so-and-so stole this amount of money. We go back to the person and we liaise with them as in, what do you mean stole this amount of money? How did they do this and that and that? And only to realize that one of the biggest challenges we face as an institute, which is obviously renowned for holding our members into account, is that not everyone is using the complaints procedure for the purposes which is used for. In certain instances, it's used as a leverage to put the other person under pressure. So you find that there is a civil case happening in the other realm which you're not necessarily aware of and which doesn't necessarily affect our processes. And once we receive a complaint, we are obliged to inform the other party or the accused that there's a complaint against you and from this party, which then adds a bit of pressure in the realm of the civil cases. And then once there's some sort of settlement, this person comes and says, but no, I wasn't really serious about that. The affidavit would enable us also to ensure that if you're not serious about something and you come to us and you swear under oath that you were serious, we should be able to take you on, which is why we work closely with SAPS, Commercial Crimes Unit, and those public prosecutorial bodies to ensure that not only are our processes not tainted, but with matters such as holding out, we report those to the right fora.
I think just to add to that, Welsh, there's also, a defamatory or a vexatious proceedings that, SAICA could face. So that's a risk that we're trying to mitigate further. The distinction between the public protector and SAICA is the public protector can get a tip-off and they have search and seizure powers. So they can go to anyone in terms of their act and get that information. Unfortunately, SAICA is limited. The only people we can get the information from is our members and whoever volunteers that information.
On URBA's website, they do have a template which allows you, I'm not sure whether it's the minimum that you have to have, etc., but what SAICA should have is something similar to make it easier and facilitate, so have a template with what you should have and explain how you should do it. So these guys don't have to phone up lawyers and it'll cost them a fortune, because that's what everybody's scared of, is that they're going to have to now get hold of a lawyer, and you know that could cost you a lot of money. So why don't you just have on the website an example of a template, an example of what should be included, and facilitate the ease of which people can complain? Because a lot of, I mean, I'm one of those guys that didn't want to do it because it's a big business. I did an arbitration, and gee, I found some stuff that really I should complain about, but as Daryl says, yeah, you know, eventually it's a hell of a thing. So if you just got a template that we could just fill out, and you could come to SAICA, and the SAICA, there could be someone at SAICA to, what do you call it, notarize it, or whatever you have to do to make it a proper affidavit.
Commission.
A commission of oaths. But someone who's not a SAICA member, because we're all commission of oaths, or have somewhere that you would make it easy for someone to do it, because we are missing out on a lot of complaints.
Yeah.
And I think we should facilitate it that way. I don't know what system you want to put in place, but somehow to make it easier for people to complain. I know we all complain a lot, I do, but we need to make it easier to complain.
Yeah, I think that's a point well noted as well. Welsh?
Chair, we've noted that point, Chair. Our office is pretty open. We've had a lot of members who come through to the discipline department and ask to speak to either one of us or the other 4 lawyers that we work with. And we're pretty open about speaking to about various members. I think most of the members who've approached us have even approached us for something that is probably around the corner, something they suspect is happening, but they don't necessarily have the information. And obviously we keep track of that. Like we keep track of literally everything that's in the public media and that comes out of the court processes, just to ensure that we are not found wanting when we start our internal processes. But I definitely take that point about making the process easier for complainants to submit their complaints to SAICA.
Yeah. Maybe you can comment about the collaboration with the RBA.
Yeah. So Alicia is always at the IRBA. I think the point earlier on was that the messaging which is coming out from SAICA and IRBA are different. Certainly that is not the case within the disciplinary area. We collaborate quite closely with the IRBA to the extent that we attend their disciplinary hearings and they attend ours. There's a referral process which works. So if, for example, an auditor is involved in a certain misconduct, we refer the matter to IRBA because they have the legislative mandate to carry out the investigations there. So if the IRBA goes through its processes and says we find this person guilty of misconduct, we then take the finding of guilt. We don't run through the process again. We take the finding of guilt for purposes of sanctioning. And that's literally where it sits. We have various meetings with the IRBA where we ping-pong ideas about how best to make the process more efficient. And I think at all times we are very much aware of what is going on in their realm as they are with us. But I guess it's not one of those things we go out publicly to advertise. But Alicia is more in touch in that area, and you want to add some more detail.
No, just to reinforce what Ralph said, we attend the URBA Invesco meetings, so we actually know what's coming to SAICA months before it actually gets here. So we have a procedure where if it's an auditor, we automatically refer it to URBA. Upon the auditor being found guilty, if the auditor is a CA as well, it comes back. We, because of our dual process, have to find them guilty. If it's one of the more serious sanctions, for example, suspension or exclusion or disqualification from membership, we will hold a disciplinary hearing just based on the sanction. But the finding of URBA, if it's a dual membership with URBA and SAICA, we are bound by their findings.
Terence, just to mention that there is a piece on the disciplinary process on the SAICA website. Under technical and discipline, it sets out in full there how someone can complain or make a complaint to the disciplinary or to SAICA about an instance of where they're unhappy. So it is on the website. There's not a form on the website, but there is a procedure that needs to be followed on there. Thank you.
We don't necessarily go out to make these things known, but if you recall, for example, the APC transgressions, we went through a period where the involvement of members and the willingness of members to assist in terms of interpreting things and finding out what is going on, just the interest, because it was such a critical phase in the history of the organization, was phenomenal. People were willing to help us understand what it is that really goes into the mind of a chartered accountant when they do things, which is, I think Shan refers to those as a pervasive skill. Just the manner in which those matters were dealt with, if you really think about it, it's phenomenal that you go through 185 cases in less than a year, and we are only left with about 145 to conclude by end of September. No other process, and I don't want to stand to say resign. No other process, I believe, can do that sort of work in such a short period of time. But it just goes to show the strength of the profession in banding together when there's a crisis and ensuring that the standard is maintained at all times. So that in itself, I think, should be sufficient. I forget the word. It should give sufficient comfort to members about the extent to which we go to ensure that whilst we don't put it out there, it's work which is done.